Hi everyone, it's Aesah. Welcome to my guide for 7 Rebel. 7 Rebel is one of my personal favorite comps. I think it's one of the comps I'm best at. So I know this comp has been in the meta for quite a long time now, but I wanted to release the guide now because I think there's quite a lot of things that I see even a lot of challenger players on North America misplaying about the comp. So let's start from the beginning. Your opener, typically you'll want to play your opener into Rebels. The reason is Irelia 2 is extremely important. Your endgame board, these are pretty much the only frontliners you're going to have. So you're not going to have Illaoi 2 most likely for stage 4 for most of your games. So having Irelia 2 and Set 2 are both extremely important to hold up that front line. If you try to pivot into Rebels on 4-1, there's a high chance you're going to have all 1-star front line and it's just not going to hold up. Another reason is if there's only 8 Rebels total, so fighting Jinx, of course, is pretty unreliable as a 5 cost. And if you're trying to pivot into Rebels, then finding Vex can also be challenging. And it's very, very important to play 7 because the jump from 5 to 7 is very, very impactful. It gives you the 2-second team-wide stun. Basically, if you're playing Rebels, you need to play 7. There's kind of a lot of other traits out there, like 6 Sentinel comps or 5 Black Rose comps, where it's okay going down to like 4 Sentinel or 4 Black Rose. But with Rebels, if you're going to invest in this trait, you really want to be playing 7. You can be playing 3 Rebel, but that's kind of just a completely different comp, honestly. Part of the value of the 7 Rebel board is it is pretty cheap, which is very important because you do need to go level 9 eventually, or at least find Jinx, one or the other. Because I would say this board, compared to any other board in the entire set on any patch, is more dependent on hitting Jinx um, than anything. Obviously, like if you're playing Black Rose, like you really want LeBlanc. If you're playing Academy, you really want Jace. But Rebel spikes harder from hitting Jinx than any other comp. In fact, there's the gold augment that gives you Jinx and Vi. If you don't have a Jinx, oftentimes playing Rebel, I would just take this if I'm in kind of an average spot just to get a Jinx and don't even play the Vi. Just using your entire gold augment to get a Jinx, it's just such a big spike for this comp. Um, your level 8 board, you're normally going to have these units. Again, if you have Jinx, you can just replace Vex or Azure or Akali. Vex is usually the weakest one. Then you have one extra slot. If you have Jinx, Ambusher is very valuable, so Echo is usually the last unit here. If you don't have Jinx, Elise is really good, just a really good unit. She gives Bruiser to your entire team with set an extra 100 HP on your whole team. And also, just like this board, kind of wants more frontline. Just because your backline damage, Zoe can give you enough backline damage as well as Ezreal. And a lot of these cheaper units, it kind of looks like there's a lot of frontline, but a lot of these cheaper units don't actually provide that much tankiness. Another thing you can play is Ambessa. She'll get Quick Striker with Akali. Ambessa's pretty good with Rebel Emblem because she's kind of a carry unit. So just putting an Ambessa on your board with no items, or if you itemize her, she's not really taking advantage of 7 Rebel. It's not going to be that efficient. But if you have Rebel Emblem, Ambessa is a decent add. Nami with Emissary is also pretty good. If you do have a stronger frontline for whatever reason, like let's say you have Illaoi 2, Nami is going to be pretty good to give you a little more damage, whereas Elise and Ambessa are going to be more of the frontliners. Those are probably going to be the most common additions. Again, if you have Jinx only, that's Echo. Otherwise, Elise, Nami, and Ambessa. These are going to be your most common level 8s. If you have Rebel +1, you can try to play like 2 of these. Of course, not the 2 emissaries. But yeah. Another thing you could do if you find Rumble, you can also go 4 Sentinel with a +1. So you could go Rumble plus another Sentinel. Again, with Rumble +1, these are the same boards you would have on level 9. So yeah. Of course, any of those variations you can play on 9. So item wise, Shojin is going to be your most important item. It's best in slot on both Zoe and Jinx. Because of this, I tend to not use swords or tears for anything else in the early game if I'm angling towards rebels. I'm not willing to slam like Static Shiv. or really any other sword or tier item if I know I'm going to be playing rebels for sure. For example, if I have a rebel commit augment such as paint the town blue, just because Shojin is so important. It's best in slot on both of these units, which are your most important units in the comp. I would say Spark on Illaoi is one of the most overrated things in this comp. Having Magic Shred is definitely good, but because if you look at the board, again, there's 4 frontliners, but out of all these units, Illaoi is the only one that is kind of a real tank. The others are kind of just there for their HP pools. So you can actually scale your total board strength by having 3 true tank items on Illaoi. Spark, even though it's a frontline item, it just gives a belt plus a cloak worth of defensive stats. The rest are all offensive stats. Um, so it's less than half of a full tank item. You're much better off with real tank items on Illaoi. Only 2 Sentinel, so you could go Snowplate without losing too much value. Otherwise, like Bramble, Declaw, all these resist items are completely fine. You're usually not going to build Val because it takes a tier. Um, you're oftentimes not building Crown Guard either because it takes a rod, and a lot of times you want these on your backline. Same thing with Steadfast. A lot of times you're going to want Glove for your backline, especially for Jinx, because you really want her ability to crit. If you have Jinx, you really need her ability to crit. It has to be either through Infinity Edge or Ambusher, one or the other. If you don't have either, then you need to find a way to fit in Ambusher. And you need Shoujo on Jinx. Very, very important again. This comp throughout stage 4 can win without Jinx, but stage 5 and onwards, you're kind of relying on making your Jinx cast as fast as possible and having a high crit chance to one shot most of the enemy boards. If your Jinx casts late into the fight, a lot of her AoE value is going to be wasted. Um, so Shojin, again, super important. Crit items are really good if you have Ambusher. So let's say we have Echo. We don't need Infinity Edge if we have Echo. So Guardbreaker gives crit. Last Whisperer will give crit as well. There'll be some pretty different. Even Hand of Justice, which is not the greatest, but even that is going to be fine. You can also just go generic AD items like this as well. But basically, you want your Jinx cast as soon as possible. Anomalies, Kill Streak, I would not take because Jinx is not actually killing anything until her third cast, at which point you don't need it. But Nothing Wasted is probably the best anomaly you can get on this board. It's good on both Jinx and Zoe. Extremely good on both of them. If you have it, I tend to not play Echo and instead just play Powder 1. The instant your Powder 1 dies, she has 120 mana. A lot of times, once she dies, she'll be up to about 100 mana just from taking damage. And then that instantly feeds your Jinx third ultimate. So I usually just position, depending on who you're fighting, something like this. I find doing something like this, make sure Powder die really, really early, instantly feeds full mana if you have Nothing Wasted. Otherwise, Echo's going to be the best ambusher you can play. If you have Rebel stat, Echo's can be a good duo carry as well, especially Echo 2-star can oftentimes do as much damage as Zoe or Jinx. Zoe items, the best is Shojin, and then Nashor's, and then Jewel Gauntlet. This is probably going to be your best in slot. Zoe has a really, really, really short cast animation. So Rageblade is going to be pretty good as well. She's going to stack it a lot faster than pretty much any other unit in the game, besides like Kog'Maw, and like Draven, like champions with even lower cast animations. But Zoe stacks Rageblade, faster than almost any other unit just because of her cast animation. So it's going to be pretty good. Nashor's is a little bit better, but it's harder to build because your belts are really valuable for your front line. Positioning wise, I actually usually put Zoe either here or here. This allows her to hit the enemy carry because let's just say your opponent is playing a full front line, like they have a full front line here. What'll happen is it bounces to 4 furthest unit in 4 hexes. So a lot of times if you hit the unit right here, it'll bounce to their carry, which combined with Jinx can help kill it on their first Jinx cast. Same thing on the opposite side, right here. This is usually the farthest target within 4 hexes. I usually don't like middle. It doesn't quite reach the corner. I usually don't like Zoe in the corner either, but you can if you're not trying to snipe anything in their backline. Augments Paint the Town Blue is extremely good. So if you're thinking about playing Rebels, tailoring for this on 3-1, making sure you have the Rebel synergy in on 3-1. I wouldn't completely sacrifice your board, but if your board is like a tiny bit weaker, I would try to tailor for Paint the Town Blue and Rebel +1 are both extremely strong. Rebel +1 is really good just because you have good users for it with Echo and Mbessa, and you have really, really weak units that you're pretty happy dropping, like Akali. Ezreal without items is not that useful either, and of course Vex before you find Jinx. So being able to drop one of these really weak units has a lot of value. One thing that's really important about this Rebel board is it's pretty popular, honestly, as well as Sentinel Academy Heimer, the Sentinel Academy Heimer Corki Ezreal board. Those are both pretty popular boards. You have to scout and make sure your Illaois aren't contested. If there are 3 players in the lobby looking for Illaoi, there's an extremely high chance you're not going to hit Illaoi 2 before the game ends. Because, first of all, it's pretty unlikely all 3 of you hit Illaoi 2, although it's technically possible. Even two people hitting Illaoi 2 when 3 people are looking for it is kind of unlikely. So you could just kind of hope you're the 1 in 3, but that's usually not going to work out so well, obviously. So it's just very, very important to scout. If you see a lot of other players angling Rebels, for example, if someone's playing 5 Rebel on stage 3, they're not holding a lot of other units. If someone has Academy emblem or Sentinel emblems, they're definitely going to be picking up Illaois. So if you're in a lobby where you see like 3 players looking to buy Illaois, unless you have a huge econ advantage for whatever reason, either through an augment or through a win streak, I would probably just try to play Soko with these items. Because you usually don't have Jinx, I usually try to build AP items first to get you through the early game and then build your Jinx items towards the end of the game. So again, I like to start with AP. Early on, this could just be Vex can hold your items with Visionary. So some of the early boards you can play could be like Vex, Irelia, and then like Sentinel Visionary with Rel. You can also go into it with just sorcerers is very common as well. If you have Lux, you can hold it. You can hold items on Lux with just Rebels and Frontline. There's actually a lot of overlap with this board and the Academy board just because Ezreal is both of them. And there's also they both have Sentinels. They both have sorcerers. So a lot of times your early game, you can actually play some mix of both of them. Something like this, for example, you got Sentinel, you got Rebels, and maybe like Zoe will give you Sorcerer. Obviously, you're not finding Zoe that early usually. There's also overlap with Visionary. For example, you have Heimer Vex as a pair as well. You can also flex in between them. For example, if you're trying to play Rebels and you find that someone has Zoe too, a lot of times you'll already have a lot of the units to go into Heimer instead. Heimer is a little worse with Shojin, but for the most part, they can use pretty similar items. So definitely look out for that if you find that Rebels is too. That's going to wrap it up on this video for 7 Rebels. I think this is one of the comps I feel most confident on. So I hope you guys do well. One last thing I want to mention, Nothing Wasted is the best anomaly, but I tend to not roll too much for anomalies in this comp. There's quite a lot of stuff you can take. I think any frontline anomaly on Illaoi, since she's kind of solo responsible for your entire frontline, is gonna I'm always gonna take it. Alright, that's gonna wrap it up now. Let me know in the Discord if you have any questions. Thanks for watching.